The first thing that happens in the connector is you see the cast assemble and they gather around the perimeter of the stage. And then a woman comes out, and this is a character who we're going to find out is named Robin. And Robin says to us, the story you're about to hear was first published in September of 1997 in the final issue of the legendary magazine, The Connector. And then you hear this. What you're hearing is a 4-note cluster. B, C, D, E. All right, what's a cluster, first of all, and why do I use it? So a cluster is a series of, let's say, 3 or more notes that are never separated by more than a step. Now, in this case, in this show, I use diatonic clusters, which is to say they're all part of a scale. They're there, as opposed to chromatic clusters, where they are not. I tend to think of them in this way. A diatonic cluster is like being stuck someplace and getting a map that has a lot of different ways out. So you can see all the different ways out, you just have to decide which one you're going to take. A chromatic cluster is like seeing the jungle from the canopy. It's just chaos. There's no way to know where you are or what you're doing. We're talking about the past. We're talking about something that's gone. It's the final issue of The Connector. So that's been, if that's 1997, then that was 27 years ago. It was a long way from now. And so what I'm trying to talk about sort of like a little bit of the mists of the past, but more specifically in the case of this show, this is a story that musically goes from clusters to clarity, single notes. And the way that the characters bring us from clusters to clarity is always very telling about who they are. So one other trick that I'm going to tell you happens at the top of the show, you can't really tell in the recording, is that you hear that cluster being sung by the cast that, like I said, is around the perimeter of the stage. But you also hear it, the second that they start, you can hear that cluster in the speakers, and they're different voices. It's 11 different voices coming from the speakers than the ones that are on the stage. And it's meant to throw you off. And it's not something that you're likely to be conscious of, but already your brain is going, oh, I don't know what sound I'm really hearing. I can't tell sort of what's going on. And that sense of confusion is essential to the show. I want you to be a little bit unsettled and feel a little out of context. And that's what that cluster says. It's trying to sort of disorient you because you can't tell what key you're in, what modality you're in, anything like that. You're waiting for someone to give you context for this. And then Ethan, who is sort of our main character, Ethan is seen sitting at a desk, and Ethan sings, and what he sings is, what looks at first to be remarkable, bizarre, will soon reveal itself to be part of a pattern. And so what he sung completely outlines an A major chord. He's giving you context. And what that does is it makes you, as an audience, trust him. Oh, he's a person who's going to give us context. And as an audience, we feel relief. We're not just stuck in the miasma of that. We're here. That's Ethan's job, and it tells us something about the way he tells stories, that he overrides the cluster. He wants to just impose context on it. But what happens thereafter, we've met Robin, she's spoken to us, and she takes over the narrative. And the first thing that happens when she takes over is that she takes the cluster and breaks it apart into single notes. So everything Robin does is going to be about pulling that cluster apart into individual pieces and trying to make sense of it. She's trying to figure out the story as opposed to imposing context on it. And that's going to be the consistent distinction between those two characters throughout the entire show. There is something very comforting about what Ethan does when he imposes context on it. He says, this is the answer. What Robin does is actually throw us more into confusion because that's the path to finding out the real truth. I think my dog wants to get involved in the storytelling at this point. Miles has joined the chat. So all of that is just what's happening at the beginning. But the fun little thing I'll also tell you is that the really fun anecdotal thing that I'm going to tell you here is that I wrote the connector knowing that I was going to be playing it. And I am a terrible practicer. I always have had just the worst discipline. I'm just awful. And so I deliberately wrote some things that were a little beyond my technique because I knew I was going to be playing the show for 3 months, and I thought that'll be good. It'll be a chance to practice every night and learn to do something I don't know how to do. And so it actually worked. I mean, I wouldn't have known how to practice every day if I hadn't had to go to the show and do it. But because I had to go to the show and do it, there are a couple of things that are hard that I learned how to do. And the very first thing that I play in the show, that whole thing with the cluster and even this thing, the piano doesn't play that. That's the second keyboard plays that. The first thing that the piano plays is this figure right here. And it's two sextuplets, 16th note sextuplets that come by. And they are this. And I wouldn't have never known how to play that if we hadn't done the show. It would have been easier to do that with two hands. But first of all, my left hand isn't very good. But second of all, it just isn't what it sounded like. I mean, like in my head, it needed to be one big right hand fill going to that. It just sounds better. And that doesn't make any sense, but that's what it was. And I still am really proud of it. And if you hear me in concert anytime in the next probably decade, I'll probably throw that link in because now it's a new one that I can do that I couldn't do before.